Okay, so, and now it's time for Fabulous Film. Oh wait, this is Star Trek. I got to go full on George Takei. And now it's time for Fabulous Film and Friends.
Oh my.
Oh my. On today's action-packed episode of Fabulous Film and Friends, I'm going to finally come clean and admit that the reason I probably started this podcast is so I could add my voice to the already mountain-high log pile of fanboys slavering and spazzing about Star Trek! I love it! I can't help it! I love it! My number one sci-fi love. I'm Roseanne Caputi, your host, and I'm joined by familiar voices Roseanne Caputi, my kid sister, who was dragged to the theater on nearly all of the screenings of the Star Trek movies, to say nothing of having to endure countless hours of replays on our home VHS player. Also joining us, once again, my good friend David Johnson, DMD, Salt Lake City's number one pediatric dentist, and a passing Star Trek fan. And beaming in with us for his first Triple F appearance is Burton Brown, another good friend originally from the Treasure Valley, who, coincidentally, is also a denizen of Salt Lake City. Bert works for the state of Utah as an IT specialist, and while I can't speak to his current attitude, was the biggest Trekkie in Eastern Oregon, Western Idaho, besides myself back in the day. I asked Dave and Bert to be my guests today because on June 9th, 1989, they made the fateful decision of saying yes and accompanying me in seeing Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, William Shatner's directorial debut, on opening night at the Pix Theater in Ontario, Oregon. Then Roseanne came with me on my second trip days later as I tried to piece together and make sense of what I had seen. Welcome, roundtable participants.
Howdy.
I'm going to throw it out. Oh, yep. I'm going to throw it out there. Star Trek V is easily the worst movie I have ever watched 40 times. At that point,
I didn't reach 40, but I've seen it enough.
At that point in my life, I looked forward to Star Trek movies more than anything else in the world, and I'm not lying. I left the theater after Star Trek V wanting to like it, saying I liked it, but knowing in my heart that it was a disaster, almost the kind of crazy bad movie you have in your dreams. And yet, I still can't let it go. The plot is simple. The Starship Enterprise is hijacked by a touchy-feely renegade Vulcan named Sybok, Spock's brother no less, who takes the ship and its crew, famously led by Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy, to the center of the galaxy to meet none other than God!
God himself.
As it is, I have a shouting, spitting, Richard Burton, Liz Taylor-style love-hate relationship with Star Trek in general, but it applies especially to this movie, and I want to work through it with you all on the internet. Bert, since you're new to this program and a fellow Trek nut, I'm going to call you out first. I distinctly remember you walking into the theater after watching this film in a disillusioned state, shaking your head and saying that was not what I expected a Star Trek movie to be. First of all, Bert, are you still a Trekkie, and do you remember anything about seeing it that night?
I still call myself a Trekkie. I like the newer Trek movies, but I really don't remember much about it. Once I watched it again, I realized it was pretty bad. But, you know, maybe we'll get into it. I took notes on some of the things that I thought were a bit moronic, and I couldn't believe it. But I can't believe you remember the date.
Well, I had the poster, which it said
okay.
On June 9th. Well, I actually, believe it or not, I remember it because I graduated from Chucker Tech that night. And and this is how pathetic I am. All I could think about during the graduation was going to see Star Trek V.
Well, I'm sure I wanted to see it too. I liked them, or I hoped to like them, I guess.
Dave, do you remember it all that night at all?
Not really. I don't remember much.
Yeah, you were pretty indifferent, as I recall, when we left the theater. I mean, I remember everything about Star Trek movies because these were big things. I mean, I guess Star Trek 2 sort of set it off for me. And then Star Trek 3, in my mind, I was a freshman in high school, and it was just awesome in my mind. Like, the best. It was one of those movie experiences I thought it lasted 2 minutes. It was just so good. Star Trek 4 I didn't like, and then Star Trek 5 I was just looking forward to it because I didn't like the style of Star Trek 4. So Star Trek 5 I was just pinning all my hopes that Shatner would pull it out and make the greatest movie ever. And anyway, and then Roseanne, I took you a couple days later. Do you remember seeing it with me?
I do. I remember we went to the Rex, right?
No,
Did we
Pix.
go to the
I
Rex? We went
drove
to
you
the
down
Pix?
to
Okay.
again.
Hey.
Special
okay.
day. I had to take. I
I
took
guess
my
I don't
9-year-old
remember.
sister.
I absolutely do. I will always remember the Greek-looking face of God with that curly ass beard, the inexplicable curly beard of the Platonic God.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
There it is. Yes.
We'll get into the effects
Yeah.
later because that's a major sticking point with me even still. But okay, so let's just I have this structured. So let's just deal with all the components of filmmaking. We've all just seen it, and so to start with, let's just start with the cinematography. Bert, let's go around the room. What did you think of how it was shot?
Well, I'm not a big cinematography buff. I wouldn't necessarily know good or bad. I I guess it was fine. I don't know much about it. I can't complain. I mean, if you want to get into the effects, we can do that later. But
Yeah.
there was certainly some stuff that, you know, caught my eye. Like the ship shots are always good, you know, to me.
Oh well,
I call them the gratuitous ship shots.
I'm gonna dispute that with you.
Yeah.
I think in this movie they look like
Yeah.
cardboard cutouts. But
Oh.
Dave, did you notice anything about the photography? Do you notice photography in films? Do you think about, hey, that film looks really good, or I mean, is this something
Yeah,
you think
I
about?
mean, it was better than the Twilight movies, if that gives you anything. It's not the worst. I don't think it was the worst movie shot.
Uh-huh.
It did feel, to me, it felt like the TV series Star Trek, to be honest, how the sets, but you know, it's not the greatest, you know, special effects, but again, I think, I don't think it was the worst I've ever seen,
Okay.
but for what it's worth.
Okay, Roseanne, did you notice a certain look? Anything about the photography?
I would say sweaty and uninspired would be the main words. Everyone looks terrible. Everything looks dark. It looks like it was filmed in a gymnasium at like 6 p.m. I just think I think the proof of God is more that your two friends are being so nice about it. I just think it looked
Well,
awful.
okay.
And
all right.
again, when do they not? Okay, every time the Klingons come on, it always looks terrible, even in movies I think are looking good. And so the Klingons in Star Trek V were shot especially horrible, I thought.
Okay, well, I disagree with all three of you. I think it was Andrew Laszlo who's the cinematographer, who was no slouch. He did First Blood. He did a number of big movies. He did Uncommon Valor. He was a decent cinematographer. I think, given that he had to hide their ages, I think for one thing, the opening with the mountain, I think is really good cinematography of Kirk. I mean, it's obviously a stunt double, so it looks like a stunt double.
That wasn't Captain Kirk.
No, Dave.
I'm just kidding.
But Santa Claus was waiting at the top of the mountain. I think that's
Yeah, I kept looking for that face shot with that, but I never saw the face. Just the hands and the toes.
Little trivia: William Shatner actually shot. He actually faced his fears and was actually up on the top of the mountain, and they filmed it. And it apparently looked. It was late in the day. Apparently, the background looked so fake. They thought it looked worse than blue screen, so they had to cut it. So he actually did fit. He actually had one shot where he was climbing the mountain, but it apparently didn't look good. Anyway, I think if the movie didn't have such wretched special effects, it would have been more cohesive looking. I mean, again, Roseanne, you're right. Everybody's pot bellies. That's a different topic. Costumes.
I understand.
Costumes is
I
not like.
understand it's not the same. But I watched Petticoat Junction. You could make somebody look skinnier than that. You know, I remember them hiding a pregnancy during Petticoat Junction. Jeez. And they couldn't do that for poor James Doohan.
They were all pretty old at that point. I mean, Like they keep. That's the problem with the film. They're just too damn old to be in space. They're just like, come on. Don't you think in the future they'd be really nicer to older people, not meaner? I mean,
Some retirement planet somewhere.
Yeah, they all look way too old to be in outer space.
But I will say that even that shot of they're in whatever El Capitan, whatever,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I just think even right before you see Kirk climbing the mountain, it doesn't look great. It doesn't immediately look like Yosemite, and it looks.
The first shot's a matte painting. That's what I mean.
Right,
That's
and
effects. Those are the effects.
Okay,
The effects
right,
are dreadful.
Okay, then
Yeah.
it's incredibly difficult to have a conversation about cinematography. I don't know if it'll even work.
But
because
the
I
shot.
think it just
Okay.
doesn't. There's no transition, so it just looks.
But the opening shot of Sybok on the horse is pretty good. There's actually looking at the cinematography. Shatner's not bad. He's actually better. Like if you look at Star Trek 3, Star Trek 3 is badly shot. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched it, Dave or Bert. Bert. I don't know if you've seen it recently. But Star Trek 3 is Leonard Nimoy with a low budget, and it's the entire movie shot in close-ups. It's like literally the entire movie is a close-up. It's because he's hiding that he's on a used set. You know, it's like there are very few wide shots in Star Trek 3. It's a bad-looking movie, period, because there's not enough variety in the shots. I think William Shatner had a better camera sense than Leonard Nimoy, and the cinematography. There's some pretty interesting shots in Star Trek, especially now that I'm looking. I go, okay, the shots of Sybok coming out in the desert, they're actually fairly good. Now the problem is they shoot only in the desert, so that's only the desert you get to see. But the camera angles are pretty good. I think okay, there's some decent.
So is it special effects or cinematography as the ship just hangs there? Like
No, that's
something
special
out of-
effects.
Okay.
I'm talking about shooting William. Now you're right; they all look old and sweaty, but they're all running around too. I mean, they look awful. They just do. But they're looking off. I mean, I think 4 they're really starting to push it. 3 they're still okay, but 4 and 5, 6 it's like, what are they doing on a spaceship? They should be, you know, lying on the beach somewhere. They're just not. It's just not right. Anyway. Okay, so I think it's I think compared to the other movies, if it wasn't for the effects ruining the rest of the movie, it probably would have been a better looking Star Trek movie than the usual.
You're saying the scenes are composed better, that William Shatner can compose a scene better than Leonard Nimoy?
I think so. Like there's some there's the shot of the foreground shot of El Capitan with McCoy's leg in it. There's some decent wide angle photography in the movie that you didn't see from Leonard Nimoy. For sure.
Okay, but even think about that Nichelle Nichols on top of the hill. I don't think that's a greatly done. I don't think that's a great shot at all.
What's the problem is they have front projection. She's in front of us. She's in front of. They don't even bother with like a green screen. They just shoot front projection. She's literally just in front of us, a backdrop.
It looks like she's singing in front of the A Street Tavern.
No,
in the
it's
middle
bad.
Of Vale, except everyone's there on a hill. It's a bad shot. I mean, she doesn't look hot or sexy. She looks like she's like.
No. Well, you're jumping right into the nightmare aspects of it, Roseanne. I mean, that's a nightmare.
You asked about cinematography. I think all roads lead to the same nightmare.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's talk about the music. Jerry Goldsmith, who did the first movie. It's a good score. It's a really strong score. The opening bars, of course, from the motion picture, and then the sort of Copeland-esque mountain climbing music, which I think is really good. Did you notice, Dave? Did you notice it all?
Yeah, I thought the music was. I like the music. I still, not to kick a dead horse, it just felt more like a TV series. How the sets and the square buttons, just on the. I don't know. It just. I just didn't look like, okay, they have this new spaceship and they're pushing these 1960s looking buttons on, like when McCoy is the scene with his dad, and it's like he puts that, I don't know what it was, to let him die peaceful. It's like one button, and then you hear the sound.
I guess he was giving his father a computer virus.
Yeah. But I mean, it just, to me, it felt more like 60s TV. So
No,
that's
I
what,
agree.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
it was
why
just-
doesn't he just take a pillow and snuff him?
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm gonna give you a virus, Pop.
It's a 24th century
Yeah, no.
unplug you.
Well, that's Bert. What do you think? Did you like Jerry Goldsmith's music?
I did. I even wrote a note that the theme music is always great. It just,
Yeah.
I don't know, it just gets me right at the beginning, dun dun or whatever it is that they do,
Yeah.
and then it goes to the standard theme. But I always liked it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but I think the music actually is a big part why I keep watching the movie. I think that it's probably Jerry Goldsmith's best Star Trek score, and it's sort of overpowering in the sense that he's doing all the emotional heavy lifting for the movie. The whole movie's riding on his score, and he made up for the lack of good effects with a decent score. Okay, getting into the nitty gritty. Here we go. What do you guys think of the script? Dave, I'll start with you.
I think this script was deeper than we think. As I watched it today, and I actually kind of liked the script. And I know you did, finding God in your opening dialogue, but I think that there was some deep meaning. There was a little brush with Gnosticism in it, this cult-like figure, Spock's half brother.
Yeah.
You could portray him as a savior type archetype, and that through suffering you can find the divine. I mean, basically face your fears is, sorry to go too deep, but it was what alchemy is all about.
No, that's why.
Because alchemy is about the metaphor of changing lead to gold through burning and adding elements to raise your consciousness to find the divine. I actually think the script was, I think the idea was I liked it, but anyway.
Well, that's why we're here. I think it does have spiritual potential, and I think Shatner, as much of a Vegas sort of cheeseball as he is, was sort of naturally gravitating toward interesting ideas. I mean, even the mountain climbing scene, which I used to just take as his ego, is actually subconsciously about him sort of rising up to heaven. I mean, there's a thematic continuity that's much, in a way, deeper than the other Star Trek movies. It's like, well, he's actually, I don't know if he means to, because there's just so much that's horrible about the movie. But when I think of why the movie's always stuck with me is because there are elements that could have been fantastic had he a better team and a better. Obviously, it's him. It's his problem. But he was gravitating to things that were sort of bigger than the series had been.
Yeah.
Roseanne, you want to comment? I see you grimacing.
No, I just think science fiction in and of itself seems like a pathway to the infinite, because it does seem like humanity merging with the infinite or merging with different either limitations or being limitless and these kinds of things. So I think Star Trek, even for its like episodic nature and these kinds of things, does sort of strive for that. I mean, the episodes before 2 and 3 are about resurrection.
Right.
And there is resurrection and ascension themes throughout it. And
but
again,
but remember, they don't delve too deeply into the resurrection aspect in the other movies.
They don't, especially because they cloak it in sort of Vulcan mysticism and these kinds of things, which I think would have been much more interesting had Sybok had elements of that, or at least anger, his own anger about his Vulcan upbringing. Anything, any context at all?
I mentally made note, like, why doesn't he talk to Spock about dying?
Right. How would he not see him as this figure? And this is the other thing Bert talked about, the 24th century or whatever, and he makes zero mention of these prophets who came before, the face of God before.
Yeah.
And other ways of merging with this infinite. Anyway, so I just think it's a problem. And again, I want it to be big. I think it's amazing that he even has these conversations is a good thing, but it ultimately turns out like an abortion discussion when someone miscarries. Like, then it adds up to nothing. He's in my heart, but also it's all in nature, but also it's in all of us because he talks about his familial feelings towards Spock. So it's all over the place. He doesn't mind one of these sort of unions with God.
Yeah, Dave, what do you think about that sort of pantheistic notion of God's not just out in the universe, he's in the human heart, which I
mean that's a very new age type approach, right? I mean, I'm just simplifying it, but the divine is within, and that's the thing that stood out. It's like when he heals, the opening scene which you talked about, when he rides in on the horse and he meets that guy in the desert, and he's like, well, you had it all, it was within you all along. And in my experience, I've kind of been all over the place. It's a very paganistic approach. It's a very Gnostic approach. Also, that the power is always within, and this cult, like he did remind me of a cult leader, was charismatic, was able to open that up in these people, and then they were just devout followers. I actually, I thought for Shatner, I think it's cool he was trying to approach these subjects. It was a broad topic, but different elements. But I guess, when he saw the face, the Greek gods, and a lot of people, God is personal, and whatever you think God is, or whether it's the universe or an energy or creation or a person, I thought it was cool that they showed different faces, because I think that's a deep meaning that, to me, it was like God is kind of whatever you believe in, if that makes sense, and it's different for everybody.
And also, I'm sorry, and then sorry.
No, it's okay.
Just thinking, the fact that one thing I really do like, and that does really elevate that scene, is then Sybok talks about his own ego being it. And so in some ways, it's also a projection of his ego. It's only these masculine, it's only these ancient, it's only this or that. And I just think that's actually taking it in a pretty deep direction, that he acknowledges ego and selfishness are part of this. Which is a rare acknowledgement in humans, let alone Star Trek.
Do you think it's well, Bert? Let's ask it. Do you're a good God-fearing type, Bert? Do you think it's a little odd that the only God they're thinking of is the human? They don't really. The one thing Star Trek always had the gag, like, well, you've heard of Plato and Shakespeare and Nikon from Rigel 7. They always they don't sort of do that in this movie. There's just almost, they do have that shockery and all that, but there is this sort of basically this sort of Christian approach to spirituality, which is a little odd considering they're talking about the universe. You're like, well, yeah, I think that's where it falls short a little bit, in the sense that they don't mention Jesus, but it does feel like it's a very specifically earth-based view of God. Did that ever enter your thinking?
Well, I think they were trying to give that impression that it was, but of course, spoiler, that he's not. Right. He was just portraying himself that way to Sybok.
But even Sybok sees him. Sybok sees him as we see Michelangelo's painting, which is a little odd considering Sybok's a Vulcan.
Well, and I didn't know if that was just the vision of Sybok, or was that how this so-called God was presenting himself to him. I didn't know if that was I think it was, I don't know, the Star Trek used that same sort of look in the Next Generation on one of their episodes, where there was some being out there in the sky that it was an old man. They portrayed it as an old man, and he was just discovering and wondering what humans are, and commenting on their bipedal locomotion. That was in Next Generation, and so I've seen some of these themes before. Even in the original Star Trek, there was that one episode. I don't know, it's been a long time, but it was the worshippers of the sun, or they
Yeah.
worship the sun, and like, the
that's
sun, and they couldn't figure it out, and then
yeah.
Uhura has the realization, oh no, they mean the sun.
Right. That's
like,
bread and circuses. If you
No.
just to insert my supreme Star Trek knowledge.
Your nerd level, yeah.
I reign supreme.
Yeah, exactly. It was I as a Christian, I always want to see, I'll say what I believe to be the truth. I would love to see that portrayed, in a movie, and this certainly wasn't it.
No.
It was kind of hinted at it, but it wasn't. I couldn't find a nugget of truth, to talk about when it come to that God and that. I don't know. The whole thing from the beginning, watching it with my critical mind, of course, over the weekend was, wait a minute. This Vulcan is doing these. I only knew he was a Vulcan because I'd seen it, but it's like he's doing a mind type mind control stuff without touching their face.
Right.
Spock always has to touch their face. I'm like, whoa, what's this?
And that's a failure for sure on William Shatner's part, because I thought about that too. I think the movie would have been much stronger if he was holding both Shatner and Nimoy's face, so you could say that he was channeling one image to the other, because it's like, how is he conjuring this out of thin air? I mean, it's just so, that's badly directed for sure.
And then it came across to me as mind control. Like,
Right.
wait, he's doing something to these people with their mind, and they're basically zombies, and he's just okay, these zombies aren't eating people, but they're all is well.
No.
Seek the God of the middle of the universe. Which
completely
Yeah.
terribly done.
And he's seen as this benign force, and he's
Right.
making Uhura slutty, and he's
No, he's not. You're wrong, Roseanne. He's not
What?
making Uhura slutty. Uhura's slutty from the beginning of the movie. It's Shatner who's made her slutty.
right. Shatner makes her
she's
slutty,
like-
but
she's
no,
like
after she
touching-
has her brain thing, then she's touching Scotty's face excessively.
Oh,
She's
yeah,
touching
So-
Scotty's face.
Scott,
She
yeah.
touches Scotty's face in the first scene with
True. Okay.
so Uhura, he has no idea what he's doing with.
Okay, he has no idea. He has zero idea about all the Vulcan stuff, even though, again, we went through Star Trek 3 with all the stuff on Mount whatever.
Celia.
So, yeah.
I know. I've forgotten a lot in my life. I can't
Yeah.
forget Star Trek.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, all of that, it just is inconsistent. And also, their dad is a character we all know. And yet, you didn't bring Leonard, McCoy has his dad stuff. We don't get any of Captain Kirk's dad stuff. We don't get any of the Vulcan. All of these roads that lead absolutely nowhere. And I just wish that it was different in that way,
Well,
especially because they do not even just the ego, but your favorite, he needs his pain. And again, what does that say about humans and how what would Captain Kirk be without his pain is a perfectly decent question to think about.
Yeah.
What would any of us be? If Spock, all of it, that would have been a great time for him to be like, well, the one time I died and came back, and then had a planet mirror my adolescence.
Yeah.
I just think, so what are the questions that you love so much? Because I don't feel like even the questions are asked.
I think the questions are asked.
What are the questions? What are the questions?
What other questions are there? What more do we have? Where is science going to lead us? Ultimately, science is still leading us to a spiritual plane. Dave, do you agree? Dave, you're the son of a Mormon biology teacher. Did you ever discuss these questions? Where science and faith intermix? I think that's what Shatner's going for.
So we would talk about science with my dad, but now my older brother obviously is another level above my dad, but when you said that, it reminded me, so it's interesting. I personally know, he's a Lakota holy man and he's in his late 80s. And so they would consider him healers, and he has a master's in one of the hard sciences. He actually has a master's degree, and he said, quantum physics and spirituality are the same. And that's what he kind of believes. And I think science is trying to get us to find God. I just don't know if, as humans, if we have the capacity to get there, if that makes sense.
It's only unimaginative people, I think, who don't see science as another language to find God, right?
Yeah, and it is a belief system. I mean, you have to believe in science just like you have to believe in anything. I mean,
Certainly.
Process. Yeah.
Bert, any thoughts?
Oh, as an overarching theme, it's just the whole. Okay, you're searching for God. Okay, why? What brought that on to him? I don't know that they really explained that. Somehow this God reached out to Cybok, or Cybok didn't know he was there, just was following some Vulcan mythology that, oh well, God's in the center of the universe on this planet that's really hidden behind this barrier that looks like some
fish tank. Looks like a fish tank. If you ask me,
yeah,
it looks like
they
got through
that they're going through. Really
got
oily,
through-
milky something. I don't know.
Didn't seem like a voyage right there. That's where the epic.
it's like-
That's where the epic quality of the film just falls flat.
Yeah, and it's like, and then they get in there, and it's like, okay, hey, there's a planet there. The Vulcans were right about that.
Well,
and then-
I've always had this problem. He's like, they have seen nothing but planets. They have seen nothing but false gods, and they're like, are we dreaming? And you're going, wait a minute. You see this stuff all the time. Why is that line in the movie? Well, that looks like another planet that we've seen before. You know?
I think the difference, Gene, is that they pierced, quote, the veil, right? What they thought was the veil,
Right.
with the starship, and so that's why I think they maybe believe that was, this may be God, because no one's ever got to this place before.
But it doesn't look. The problem is it doesn't look out of the ordinary.
No, yeah, I agree. It looks like a normal planet.
Visually, you needed to show us something we've never seen before, because
Yeah.
they've seen nothing but planets. I mean, they've seen. Again, if you go through just the original series alone, they've seen Adonis, or Apollo. Sorry, Apollo.
Yeah.
They've seen Trelane, who's another like celestial little kid, who could do whatever he wanted. They had Charlie X, who could do whatever he wanted. They had Gary Mitchell, who was Kirk's best friend, who they never, brought up again, who became a god. I mean, they've been facing god-like characters on and every season at least 4 or 5 times. I mean, so it's not like anything new to them.
Well, I thought the planet, so they were naming it Eden. I'm like, boy, that's pretty barren.
Yeah.
Eden is supposed to be like a garden,
Right.
And in the physical presence of God, and it's like, well, that's
And it was
not much
different for
there.
everyone.
The Vulcan planet is a desert, so I thought it was always Cybok's view, because Vulcan's a desert. So I thought that's why he thought it was home. But
in a sense too, aren't there things like almost Stonehenge coming up, like
Yeah.
the stone things like that? And also, I just think if we were just looking at it visually, I think there is sort of I guess, exodus from Judaism to what seems like paganism, because it is bookended by Yosemite and by them being sort of rooted in this beautiful natural landscape. And then again, the idea of residing in your heart. It does seem as though if you were to the theme.
So you have found a theme, because
I have.
through finding the devil, their relationship is stronger. So that's part of the.
What a tired theme. I don't know.
It's a theme. It's a theme. They do face down the devil, basically.
And then then I would say their respite then is in the things of nature.
Right. Clearly.
Well, for Kirk anyway, I think
For
Kirk
Kirk.
dragged along the other two.
Okay, except that Spock then starts singing, and he actually he leads them off, right? And rows the
Right.
boat,
Right. No, that's a
which
key
is-
point. Remember, he doesn't sing before, and he's contemplating.
Right.
He's contemplating the meaning of row your boat.
Right, life is but a dream, all these things. So again, which I think is a total ephemeral cop-out. but whatever. Again, if you're taking, so I think Spock is with him as well on this journey that apparently then is rooted in, I think, the natural and the, I guess, emotional human landscape.
I'd agree with that. I know Shatner was going to literally find God, and they said, no, you can't do that. So, I mean, that's... And he mentions it in all the... I poured through all of the Blu-ray extras to see what they had to say about it. And again, typical Blu-ray... I think even if somebody addressed it, they cut it out just because it would offend somebody somewhere. So I wanted to know what they were thinking on two levels, on why the production failed, because there is a documentary on why it is a failure. And I really think, I mean, there are a number of failures. Which leads to the big gripe, which is the visual effects. They don't address exactly why it's terrible, and which I find disappointing. Like, well, they do a retrospective documentary, and they talk about why the budget got cut, and that's all Shatner talks about. Like every time, even when he's launching the film, they show a press release in 1989 of him talking to all the reporters. He's always talking about the budget being cut. It's like, that's funny. It's just an odd thing to talk about when you're pushing a film. So it's like it was kind of a big deal. So he had this vision of them actually being on the river Styx, and God transforms into the devil, and he's being chased by demons and rock creatures. He had this huge extravaganza written, and of course Paramount said, no way. And they ended up with one Rockman, and it looks really bad. And you get to finally see the Rockman in the cut scenes, and you can see why they cut it. It just looks it looks like you would expect in a William Shatner movie. But here's
but to have such a vision, then where was he going to go with that?
Spock, the same thing was going to happen, that Spock was going to save him in the end, and sort of come together. And apparently the devil was going to divide Spock and McCoy and Kirk to where they had to find their way back to each other, as in, they were divided with Sybok, and meaning Spock was on Sybok's side and McCoy was on Sybok's side, and Kirk had to sort of which McCoy, apparently DeForest Kelly and Leonard Nimoy refused anyway. They said, no, we would never desert Captain Kirk. So that's why that was rewritten. But it was supposed to be them sort of coming together after this religious experience. Anyway, the Rockman was this big finale, and there's supposed to be 10 Rockmen, and then it went down to one Rockman, and it would have been embarrassing, so they cut it. But I can't imagine the Rockman being more embarrassing than what they have. I mean,
certainly.
So let's get into the effects. My thesis, there's a lot of things to fix in that film, and you can't do a director's cut, because you'd have to have a scene somewhere where you explain Sybok's control over the crew.
I think the hugest problem with the special effects and everything in that movie is there's no sense of movement, there's no sense of speed.
Yeah.
To me, everything feels incredibly stagnant in the ship. I just feel like the Klingons, everything just feels blocky and monolithic.
Yeah.
And I think that's on Shatner.
No, it's not. It's not.
How is it not?
It's on Paramount. It's on Paramount because we... No.
Poor washed-up Papa's boy who just loves Shatner. I mean,
no, I'm telling you.
What do we have to do to blame this guy for this movie? He showed Paramount a rough cut of the film without the effects, okay, and they all loved it. And I've read this in his biography about the movies. They were all going, okay, once the effects come in, great, it's great, it's a good movie. And the effects come in and they're terrible, and even Shatner knows they're terrible. They didn't pay for more effects. That's Paramount. And what gets me is after all this time, and Bert, Roseanne, me. Not you, Dave. You don't own a Blu-ray of the movies, do you?
No, I don't have a Blu-ray player.
I have bought every incarnation of Star Trek, whether it's VHS, DVD, and now Blu-ray. I have those movies on every possible media, and they have made their money tenfold for what they spent on Star Trek V, and they still wouldn't fix those effects, which is just, to me, just bonkers. Like, the guy's 90 years old, his Shatner, that is. Roseanne thinks I have, like, a father figure in Shatner, and I do. Damn it, he's good. But you would think they would just say, all right, we'll give you some money to show the Rock Man and to make the ships actually move through space. The Starship Enterprise, literally, when it goes through the cloud, literally just shrinks like I would do. Like I would do on one of my videos. It literally just, instead of moving, like with a motion control camera, they really just take a cutout of the Enterprise and it shrinks into the screen. Like, yeah, like it's a 1950s movie. Even the TV show wasn't so bad.
But, right, that's what I'm saying. Ed Wood. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
but
then,
that's not
so
Shatner.
So if the effects had been better, would this have been a successful movie about the nature of the search for God?
I think it would have been more visually compelling. You know, I think the effects...
So then would it have gotten us there?
No, because, again, you still have the inherent problems of Cybok's relationship with Spock. You have the inherent problems of the crew not at all, you know, how do they turn all to become religious nuts? It doesn't make any sense. That's really bad.
Well, clearly you haven't been among a Mormon congregation then, Gene.
But again, all jokes aside, let's just say it is like a cult and they all sort of take sides. Why? There's no explanation to what...
Well, he's charismatic. I mean,
that only goes so far. There's going to be people who, on the ship, they show every crew member sort of listening, you know, he's like, dear brave members of the Starship Enterprise.
Oh, yeah, they stop walking.
We're going to Shakari, and they all look up like, wow, like, how did that happen? He went to every one of them and went, I feel your pain.
But to be fair, Captain Kirk didn't, right? He and Spock, they resisted.
Right. So you're saying that nobody else on the Enterprise? Look, what about the one guy whose pain is just to mop the floors? I feel your pain. You have a boring job of swabbing the deck. What would you say if I told you didn't have to swab the deck? I'm with you, man.
Well, maybe his voice, you know, his voice has power.
Like, that is one huge error, and I don't know. You couldn't do a director's cut because you'd have to fix that problem. Like, well, there's no way you can get around the fact that how the heck did he get in control of the entire crew?
Well, and then what happens afterwards when he's not in control anymore? Oh, what was that?
Yeah, right.
Why did I believe that for 10 minutes? You know?
That was the old me.
Yeah.
Ew, I was caressing Scotty. Ew.
I feel like I was begging for that scene where she's just filled with disgust and
Scotty,
regret.
I was under the influence of something.
I'm going to give you your all cosmic thoughts. Final cosmic thoughts? Have we said them? Cosmic thoughts, Roseanne?
Sorry.
Go for it, Dave.
I'll watch this movie again for what it's worth. So, yeah. Yes. I mean, there were problems, but I think and it had potential, but I think there's some underlying themes that I liked. So, for what it's worth.
Amen. Bert, will you watch this film again, ever?
Yeah, I've got it. You know, I've got the Blu-ray and digital, so now I can watch it from any device I ever want to. From certain places. I don't know. There was just a lot of weird little things, but to me, that's just part of Star Trek, you know, and it's part of the original series. And I, you know, my wife has no interest in it, but I try to show my kids, hey, this is the dumb stuff I used to watch, you know. So.
No, my kids want none of it. It's just.
Yeah. Well, I don't think mine do either, but
I might as well be
watch it anyway.
I might as well be watching them video of people being fed at a nursing home. They just like, they're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Roseanne, you get the final word. Would you watch this film again?
No.
Hey, Gene, the final word, though. Will you do Sulu saying on course, Admiral?
Okay, you got it. On course, Admiral. Estimated space dock in 2.9 hours.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Like and subscribe. even though I have no idea how to like and subscribe on my own chat. All right, everybody. Thank you. Warp out.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Thank
See
you
ya.
all.
Thanks, Gene.
That's great. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Fabulous Film and Friends. Copyright 2024, a Bel Air Films production.